Everybody, BoxingBoa coming back at you again today. I wanted to, last time I didn't have these guys out because I had eaten. I usually give my snakes 2 to 3 days before I mess with them. But I wanted to reiterate what I'm talking about, like layering, or what happens when you add more genes to a Pacific Morph. This is a Motley boa. Now, you can see how this is co-dominant. There is a super form, but it is lethal. Now there are certain, like if you use certain, I think if you use a leopard Motley, then breed that to another Motley, you can create, I think it's the Eclipse if I remember right. There's so many different morphs out there, it's hard to keep track of what makes what. But those can live. But if you take her and I breed her to another Motley, those will be you'll get all black babies, which is a super form, but they'll all die. Now there have been a few Motleys super Motleys that were BCI, more BCI bloodline, because all Motleys have Costa Rican bloodline, because that's where they originated from. But ones that have higher percentage of BCI in them, there's only been like a handful that I think have made it to adulthood. All the other supers usually die within a year or two, if not after a couple days of being born. But anyway, what I want to talk about is you can see how the pattern on Motley looks, and she's got an excellent Motley pattern. But if you notice on this girl, she is, for a Motley, especially one starting to get to her size, she's staying very, very light color. She's got great purples, highlights in there, some pink highlights in there. Just excellent color. And just a perfect Motley pattern. But this is what happens when you start adding more genes and more morphs. Even though they don't carry that, like what I'm saying when I say they don't carry, like, okay, say I bred her to a hypo and I got Motleys that aren't hypo, they're going to look different than your average Motley because I added another layer. Even though they didn't get the hypo gene, that still changes the way they look. And this is a perfect example. This is Athena. She is from a fire breeding, okay? And I talked about this in my last video. A fire is what you take a fire to a fire and you get the super form, which is a leucistic boa. But the fire gene itself is co-dominant, and it's a lightning. Like when you look at a fire, no matter if it has Arabisk in it, Motley, just even a regular fire, it's a lighter boa. It changes the dynamic of that morph. And she's a perfect example. Even though she didn't get the co-dominant trait of the fire gene in her, just by the fact that one of her parents were a fire has changed the dynamics of this Motley. And what did it do? If you go and look at just your average Motley, all snakes get darker as they grow for the most part. But if you look at a lot of Motley boas, especially the older ones, they're very dark. Even ones starting to get to her size, they're very dark boas. But just by adding the fire gene into her, even though she doesn't carry it, because I think that some of it, when you layer another morph onto it, even though they might not get that co-dominant or recessive trait, it still changes the color pattern, or it can change the saddles. It adds a different dynamic, and you can see it in her. She's a perfect example. She is super light for a Motley. I mean, just absolutely, just look at that face. You can see that head pattern, and just look how light that is. And you can see how much pink she has in her. And that's something that a lot of the original Motleys didn't have. And this is not a pastel. I've seen Motley boas like this being sold as pastels. And they're not true pastels because she has no pastel in her. She just has that extra little parent in there that was a fire that changed the look of even the sibs of these that aren't fire. And she's a perfect example of what I'm talking about when you start layering things. It's, you know, how does one morph interact with the other morph? And how does, you know, you start adding more and more layers onto that, and it's going to constantly change. And you can refine this. You know, you can sit there, and I can sit there and put her to a pastel boa. I can put her to an albino. I can put her to a hypo, and the babies are going to come out a little bit different, similar to her, keeping that look that she has, but they're still going to be layered differently. And that's when you start line breeding and stuff like that, trying to get like Motleys to really have these nice colors like this. You know, but this is what happens when you start layering. It definitely changed her. She is super, super light. Just absolutely incredible. But she kept that Motley pattern because that is co-dominant. Now I'm going to show you another Motley. Let me put her away. I got her in a holding bin here like I always do. Sorry if I'm off frame, guys, but you guys can hear me talk. And she never ever wants to go in these holding tubs. She pushes and pushes it to where she wants out. She just never likes to go in there. Oh, by the way, just so you know, say you don't want to use your hand or something. If you got a holding tub, I'm going to shine. Thank you for returning that. You just don't want to reach right in there. And I've showed you a couple other techniques, but another tip, if you are using a holding tub to clean cages, or if you want to do a video or you got to transport them and you can't find your hook and you got a little snake that might be a little cantankerous, a little defensive because they're nervous because they're in something that's not their home, you can take the lid of a holding tub and just put it between you, your hand, and the boa's head. Touch the boa and or snake, and then you can pick it up just fine like that. So that's just another quick little tip for you guys, that if you want to get a snake out using a holding tub, if you can't find your hook or something like that. Now this is Poseidon. This is a Motley, and you can see how his pattern is definitely different. Why? Because he's a jungle Motley. And not only is it, and so now you added an extra layer. You can see the difference between a Motley that has a fire, and then you can see what the jungle, and jungle and Motley are both co-dominant. There is a super form of jungles. It just really, they're really super, super clean. Unfortunately, there are issues with super jungles. A lot of them can't reproduce. A lot of them don't make it to adulthood, but the ones that do are absolutely incredible, which is why you'll see some jungles out there for sale that are called super Motleys, and they say pet only, and that's why. But this guy right here, the Motley gene, the jungle gene really changed the Motley pattern. And you can see that nice stripe. He's just got that gorgeous, you could definitely tell he's Motley, but that jungle just added it. And not only that, the jungle gene, not only does it create aberrant patterns, and not always does it, some of it creates the bow tie saddles and stuff like that, but it's a color enhancer. The jungle is also a color enhancer. So that also adds to this Motley. But then you add the VPI gene, and he is 100% hit for VPI, which is just a T-positive albino, a very attractive albino, probably one of the nicest looking albinos in boas out there. But that adds a whole nother layer. That adds another dimension. And this is what I'm talking about when you start layering things, okay? So not only did he get the Motley and the jungle gene, but he's 100% hit for VPI albino. And so that creates this very light colored boa that is, and right now he's a little dark on his head, and he does do these color changes, which is really cool. He'll have dark days, light days, and I've talked about that in videos in the past. But I'm going to hold his head just a little bit here, and you can see just how silver his head is. He's got this very, very, very silver head. And he's got, he doesn't have a lot of, like in the other one, in Athena, you saw a lot more purples and pinks, some browns, stuff like that. Within him, so he doesn't have hardly any pinks. But there are pinks in there, and you can see it. Hopefully it picks up in the video, but you can see these light little flecks of pink, that goes along the sides. And let me see, right here, you can really see the orange-ish pink colors, okay? So you can definitely see these little hints of oranges and pinks, but not a whole lot. He's much more silver. He's much more light pattern. And that's what I'm talking about. That's a layer. I mean, you take your codom in Athena, you add another codom with the fire, even though she's not hit for fire, and it changes that dynamic. Then you got this guy that shows the codom genes in both the Motley pattern and in the jungle. But then he has that recessive pattern that's in there. And he is hit for VPI, and so that changes his dynamic even more, which makes this very light colored silver looking boa that is just absolutely incredible. And I mean, there's some days where he is just has these little, like, he almost looks lavender silver, if you know what I'm saying. I wouldn't say necessarily lavender purple, but more of like a lavendery silver look to him. And this is what you start to see. When you start adding different morphs and you start layering and layering. And I could sit there and go in and talk about, you know, the fancy words on how to describe how this works, polygenics, and, you know, just a bunch of other words that, you know, you see a lot of breeders use. I'm trying to explain this to you that's more in a way that, you know, everybody can understand. Because, you know, it can get confusing when you start thinking about it. But if you look at it as like layers, it's much easier to understand and much easier to break down. You know, but just you can just see, just look at the pattern on this guy, just absolutely incredible. The jungle gene really distorts the morph gene. It really changes the morph gene, really changes the Motley gene. And even though he is Motley, it looks nothing like Athena. And that's what I'm talking about, layers. So when you guys are sitting there pairing things and you're doing things like that, you know, and I know a lot of people say, you know, a lot of people get frustrated, not frustrated, but they're like, oh, well, this is just a normal. You know, and what I mean by that, or this is just a Motley, or this is just a jungle. No, it's not. It's so much more than that, because depending on what mom or what dad you use for that breeding, it changes. And so a lot of people overlook the sibs. And it's absolutely tragic, because there are a lot of good-looking boas out there. Just because it isn't a morph per se, you know, or just because it isn't some expensive snake, doesn't mean that that one isn't just as equally nice. Another thing, you know, you talk about how people can miss layers, okay, or miss line breeding. There's a famous carpet python out there, not a famous carpet, but a famous line of carpets out there. It's called a gamma jag, and the gamma jag is absolutely a stunning carpet python. But what happened was, people were breeding these gamma jags, and they were only selling the gamma jags as gamma jags, but they were sleeping on the sibs and just selling them as sibs. Well, it turns out, you know, people have finally discovered that, wait a minute, just because this gamma jag sib isn't a jag, it's still a gamma. The bloodlines are still there. The layers are still there. So technically, if you see a gamma and you see sibs, you'll see them sold as gamma jags and then sibs. If you see those, buy those sibs, because if you take a sib from that, which is a gamma, and breed that to a jag, you can create gamma jags. You know, and so that's why it's so important to not just pay attention when you're breeding or anything like that, but it's so important to pay attention to. You are squeezing my neck harder. I can tell you're getting little. I'm moving around, so it's making. See, this is what I'm talking about. I'm moving around. You see my body doing this. He starts squeezing a little bit harder. Why? Because I'm not, like I told you in my other videos, I'm not being that solid tree for him. I'm moving. I'm swaying, so he's gonna hold on to me a little tighter because he wants to have more security. But anyway, I digress. When you can create those types of things, I kind of lost my train of thinking, but anyway, you know, you'll see you can make a gamma jag yourself by buying a sib. And the good thing is, David Moore posted a picture. He got a gamma sib, which is actually a gamma, from Martin. And all of a sudden people go, wait a minute, whoa. And then that snake that jumped, gamma jag sibs were going around 200 to 250, all of a sudden jumped up in price from everybody that had gamma sibs to $300, $350 to $400, because they realized that the genetics and bloodline and line trait is there. You know, and so, you know, don't just snooze on them. When you have a clutch or you have litter or you're looking at a snake, don't just go right to the morphs all the time. Look at the babies. You know, when you have a litter, I see a lot of people will do egg cutting videos, or will do they'll show their baby boas and just different animals, and they'll go, especially when you see egg cuttings, they'll go, oh, that's just a normal, that's just a pastel, that's oh, there's that 4-gene animal I wanted, or there's that Motley Jungle VPI I wanted, you know, and they kind of overlook the other stuff, and that's just not right, because you got to think about the layers that have been put on this. Because if you notice now, and a lot of you guys, sorry, I got to get a drink of my water. If you notice now, if you look at, and I'll use ball pythons as a perfect example of this, because ball pythons, pastel ball pythons, are absolutely a gorgeous ball python morph. And it works differently than boas. Boa pastel morphs are line bred, selective breeding to continue to get that pastel. The more you get away from a pastel line boa, the more it'll look less and less like a pastel. To where in ball pythons are co-dominant, meaning if you breed a pastel to a normal, you'll get, I think, roughly half the babies are pastel, and there's also a super form. So it's really cool. So that's a little bit of the pastel gene for those of you that don't know about pastel ball pythons. Many of you do. But the one thing I've noticed, in recent years in pastels is they're really starting to increase on their beauty. It used to be pastels, you get a pastel ball python and it looked beautiful as a baby, and then as it got older, like a lot of snakes, it browned out, and a lot of people looked at it and, like, if you didn't know what you were looking at, would look at that ball python that was adult and say, that's a pastel, looks like a brown normal snake to me, but it wasn't. You know, but now within the last few years, I've been seeing a lot of people producing and having adult pastel ball pythons that are absolutely incredible looking. You know, so don't just overlook, you know, when you're breeding or when you're looking to buy, don't just overlook that egg and go, oh, that's just a pastel, because with the amount of layers that have been done with the pastel, with so many genes, you know, the spark, the cypress, can you imagine a Mardi Gras pastel, but you don't get Mardi Gras, you get just a pastel. That pastel is going to look different than any other pastel out there. Even though it didn't get the Mardi Gras gene, it still got traits, because you don't know how much traits it's going to gather from that other breeding. You know, even though it might not get that Pacific co-dominant trait, still, you know, it's going to rub off. It's just like when you have kids. For those of you, and I'll try to explain a little bit better for you. Okay, for example, I am Mexican, and actually I'm technically Spain, according to my genealogy, I'm Spain, Native American, and then I have Irish and German in me. So, but I have black hair, brown eyes, dark skin. So that is dominant over blue eyes, blonde hair, white skin. But when I bred, I'll use that for you guys that know about snakes, with my wife, we had 3 beautiful kids. Now, when they were all young, they all had very light colored brown hair, almost blondish brown. Now they've all kind of gotten darker brown hair. But the dominant gene in me, the black hair, did not transfer to my kids. They did not get brown hair. They did not get black hair. And a crazy thing is, none of them got brown eyes. All 3 of my kids have blue eyes. So you don't know, you know, it's just about what happens, you know, on what traits you're going to pick up. So that's what happens in breeding too. The snakes are they might not get that co-dominant or that recessive gene, but the little things are going to rub off on that baby from the parents. And so that changes the whole dynamic. And that's what I'm talking about, layers. You know, and that's where you get line breeding and stuff like that. So just, I just wanted to touch back up on this topic so to help you guys understand a little bit more of what I was talking about. And I'll go ahead and grab Athena out. She wants out. She always wants out. She never wants to go in a holding tub. She's always on the go. And this is a perfect example. These are these 2 guys side by side. Well, a girl and a guy. And just already, I'm trying to do this to where I gotta support them, but at the same time I want to show you guys, and that's what makes it hard. You can see the difference in them. You know, and this is just what happens when you have a fire, even though it's not hit for fire, and then you have a jungle with some that's 100% hit VPI Motley. You know, you get different looking animals, even though they're both Motley. One has jungle and is 100% hit VPI. One is a Motley, not hit for fire, but has fire in his background. And it just, you can tell that just the dynamic it changes. Even the heads here, let me see if I can't get these guys to cooperate a little bit with me. Even the heads are slightly different. Not size or anything like that, not shape, but just the color. You know, and the patterns are way different, even their side patterns. And you can see much more pinks and purples in Athena than you can in Poseidon. And he's got much more silver. He's actually coming out and saying hi. You know, so, you know, this is just some stuff to pay attention to. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about layers and just some stuff to pay attention to. You know, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it's probably long. How many minutes we at, buddy?
22 minutes.
Alright, so this is a 22-minute video again. I know I've been doing these long videos, but I just feel like I need to explain it. Hopefully I broke this down enough for you to understand without getting all technical and using all that fancy lingo jargon that people hear. Yes, do I know it? Yes, but who cares? I want people to understand. You know, I don't want people to have to go and study like a college exam, even though I do study like I study my animals like I'm doing a college exam. I still want people to understand what I'm talking about. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this very long video. Thank you guys so much for being patient and watching my video. I want to give a shout out to TNT Ball Pythons. They're doing a Python giveaway. So I'll leave a link in the description below for you guys to go and check them out so you can enter into that giveaway. It's a very cool snake. Very nice of them to do. So I'll leave a link in the description so you guys can go check them out and hopefully get a chance to win a ball python. So anyway, this is BoxingBoa, Priest, Athena, and Poseidon. Thank you so much for watching. God bless everybody out there. If you have any questions or comments, just please leave them down below. You know I will get back to you. Thank you so much for watching. You guys have a blessed day and a positive day, because I know I always am. Peace.